right, we are back here at AT&T Stadium, and we are joined by the venerable, the respectable, the NFL insider for I don't want to date you.
Are you calling me old already?
No.
Are these words that are used
That's
for
only
for
what
elders?
Andrew's calling Joe Trahan.
I was going to say, I got in trouble with that the other day.
We're calling Joe Trahan old. I got real
No,
problems.
Weathered and experienced.
You're just the elder statesman of the three.
You're just more
4 people
knowledgeable
at the
than
table.
any of us, is the truth.
That
I
is
don't know
the
about
truth.
that.
Yes,
No, it
so
is.
NFL insider for many years. You've covered the Cowboys for decades. Seen them at their best, seen them at arguably their worst.
And usually somewhere in between.
Yeah, right. Fan expectation for this team is always here. Where do you think fans should be going into this season?
Well, I think you have every reason to believe that, the offense is going to be really good as long as Dak Prescott stays healthy. But he started 17 games last year, and he doesn't have a recent history of going through consecutive seasons without being injured and missing a significant number of games. So that's a concern, especially since we don't know, how good the tackles are going to perform on the offensive side of the ball. But the biggest question is obviously the performance of the defense, because they wasted such a great opportunity last year, like I said, with Dak playing 17 games and finishing with a losing record despite all their offensive proficiency. I mean, they ranked among the best teams in the league in offense. Elite teams. Everybody else made the playoffs, won divisions. The Cowboys didn't even have a winning record. So to me, it's all about how good is Christian Parker going to be in his first year as a defensive coordinator, and how many of these young players are going to be able to make an impact on that side of the ball right away.
I know we're going to get into the defense quite a bit, but I want to ask you specifically about what you just mentioned. Dak, in the first address he gave at camp, said very kind of like reflectively, look, I had probably the best season of my career last year. We didn't even make the playoffs. What did you make of his assessment of that? Because to me, it kind of said, look, I can play as good as I want. It's not just up to me. Like, I need people all around me, specifically on the defense side of the ball, if I want to go where I want to go.
Right, that's what Jerry said, right, when he announced Christian Parker as the next coordinator, was that, we just watched Dak Prescott have arguably the greatest season of his career, and we finished 7-9-1. And we're eliminated with 3 weeks to go in the season. We had a 4,000-yard passer, 2,000-yard receivers, 1,000-yard rusher. We weren't even close to the playoffs. So, yeah, but to hear it from Dak, who was basically, he was essentially saying, I thought after all these years, me playing my best, that I could carry this team.
Yeah.
And this demonstrates to me that that's not the case. And so that's an interesting admission by him, as is the fact that he seems to be suggesting more recently in camp that, hey, some of the leadership burden has been taken off of me so that I can just focus on playing quarterback. And I know how important that was to Troy Aikman. When Jimmy was there and he was a demonstrative, authoritative head coach, and Troy didn't have to he didn't have to play that role. It was a burden lifted off him. I think Dak's experiencing that now.
What is a realistic expectation for this offense, given what they were last year? And I know some stats probably don't showcase how dominant they were, especially given their red zone percentage, but is that kind of the one missing link that this unit can really excel at moving forward, that you can point as a huge check up?
Yeah, so the Cowboys I think there were 5 teams last year that ranked in the top 5 in passing offense, rushing offense, and 2 other offensive categories. And those teams were like the Rams, the Eagles, the Patriots, the Seahawks, all teams that had great years and made the playoffs, and most of them got deep in the playoffs. So, yeah, I think the expectation should be it's going to be an elite offense as long as Dak is healthy.
Yeah.
And that's a question with every team. Like, there's nobody in the league who's going to win long term if they don't have their starting quarterback.
Unless you're the 49ers, I guess, who just trot out whoever and they throw for how many yards. It's crazy.
And I guess the Eagles won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles, not that long ago. But
still,
that's a rarity that would happen.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, I think they're capable of being a great offensive team. I think penalties are an issue on the offensive side of the ball. But I think it's amazing that despite the fact that if you look at it statistically last year, because the defense was so bad and didn't create any turnovers, because the special teams wasn't really that good at covering kicks and punts, They faced on offense the longest field in the NFL. They had the worst starting field position of any team in the league, and they ranked 7th in the NFL in scoring.
Yeah.
Like, that's how good this offense truly is. And they had the running game element with Javonte Williams. I think that's another place where they can get better. Like, that's why they want Jaden Blue to be a part of the offense because, like, Javonte Williams, as good as he was last year, he averaged 3.9 yards per reception. Among players who have had at least 25 receptions, that's the second worst in the history of the league. And it's not an aberration. He's been below 5 yards per reception for 3 of the last 4 years. So that's where Jaden Blue can make an impact and create some explosive plays.
We saw a little bit of Javonte's. It looked like he was better the first half of the season than the back half of the season. To your point, I think bringing in that second running back or somebody who can take the load off of him, and it doesn't have to be a 50-50 split, but if they can make it a 60-40, that keeps both of them in better situations. And Blue has flashed in camp.
No, he has.
And he was in the doghouse pretty much all of his rookie year last year. But he has looked fast. And it brings an element that we haven't seen really from this rushing game in a few years.
And you know better than anybody that they have pointed to not necessarily what they saw from him on the field last year that kept him really on the practice squad for the majority of 2025, but it was the maturity piece, right? Like, even the Louis Vuitton cleats, and there were things that he just
Which were fine if they would have fit.
That was the other
right.
thing. Yeah,
Minor
his
detail.
foot hurt because he was wearing
He's like, Coach, I got a blister. But no, I
Coach
mean,
him out.
all of,
Blame Louis Vuitton.
when I was out there for the start of camp and what I've heard since is that he has taken such a tremendous step in terms of his maturity, kind of the off the field responsibilities that are required of someone who's going to be successful in the NFL. I just wonder how much you think that there is potential for him to take that big jump here in the second year.
Well, I mean, I think it's not uncommon for a player to show significant improvement from their rookie year to their second year and to begin to embrace and understand what exactly it takes to play and excel at this level. Yeah. I mean, I think he knew he was going to make the team last year, and now he knows that, but he wants a role.
Yeah.
And I think Schottenheimer was pretty consistent demonstrating last year. I don't care where we picked you. I don't care what you're capable of doing. If I don't see it in practice, if I don't see it in the meetings, you're just not going to play. And so it's up to him. But and if he demonstrates that, as it seems he is, remains still to be seen. Yeah. But I think then they can try and find a role for him, and then it's up to the coaches to create opportunities where he's in space and can use his speed.
I mean, on that note, just yesterday, or no, they were an off day yesterday, so it must have been
2 days ago.
Yeah. I've lost all track of time.
We all have. It blurred together during
new
camp.
thing.
Yeah.
That's training camp in a nutshell.
But Donovan Ezeraku being asked to leave practice because of his semantics. Yeah. Or not semantics, but because he was trying to fight. Like, that goes to show exactly what you're talking about when it comes to Brian Schottenheimer, the standard that he's talked so much about, but him also then upholding it when he sees things that he doesn't like.
Right. Well, and some people would be critical of a coach for having that policy because it costs a young player that you're depending a lot on to grow into a more significant role, a lot of practice reps. But I think it also sends a message that, hey, if this is what you're going to do in the game, like, they're going to kick you out of the game. These are the consequences. So if you hate missing practice and you feel bad about imagine if you get kicked out of a game and you get fined, and which he did get fined a couple times last year. But yeah, I think it sends the right message as far as this is acceptable behavior, and it's acceptable behavior every day that you're in a uniform, whether it's a game day or a practice day. We're not going to tolerate it because it's not going to be allowed by the officiating crews on Sunday.
I was going to say, wasn't Ezeraku ejected from the last game of the year too?
Yeah.
So it kind of leads straight in.
And that's probably why they took the hard line on him in this situation. Like, he should have learned from that at the end of last year,
right,
against the Giants when he got kicked out of the game.
If it was like week 3 or something, there's enough time in between. Maybe it's a relapse, but like, this just happened.
Yeah.
Like, your last time on the field, you literally got ejected from this. Settle down. Find a way to impact the game in another way. 100%.
Are you saying that he's got some edge to him?
Yeah, sure.
He's an edge rusher.
Yeah.
I cannot.
Needs a little more rush, more than the edge. That's the thing. That's kind of the question, though, right? Like, when we were talking about the offense and the defense aspect of it, the offense shouldered so much of the burden last year where they had to be successful for the team to be successful. And they probably took chances on 4th downs or 3rd down plays just to try and keep drives alive that otherwise they probably wouldn't have, just playing a normal.
It totally changes the way you coach
exactly.
and call plays as an offensive play caller. So unfortunately does having one of the great long distance kickers in NFL history, right? Like that makes you more conservative. Having a bad defense forces you to be aggressive.
Right. Looking at the defensive side of it now, because I do feel like we should start pivoting toward arguably the more important side of the ball, given what we expect the offense to do on a regular basis. Where is the hole at this point? Because we are getting the positive elements of camp all the time. Defensive line looks strong, great leadership presence. Safety looks like it's been upgraded a lot with Caleb Downs and Jalen Thompson. Where is the hole? Because it feels like it's a cornerback.
Really hard to tell anything
right.
with what they're doing. I mean, they
Sure.
don't have two-a-days. They don't do the Oklahoma drill. They don't tackle. They barely thud up and hit. So it's really hard to. And then in the preseason, they don't play.
They
so,
like going series.
Yeah, we'll let you know. And week 1 last year, we thought the defense looked pretty good, right, against the Eagles, except for how they handled Jalen Hurts when he broke contain and ran the football.
Yeah.
I think the questions are at corner, on the edge. Who, if anybody's going to be able to replace the rush that they had, from Micah Parsons. And no one player is going to completely do that. But we saw in 2021 they did kind of what they're doing now, right? They changed the coordinator. Now, in 2021, after Mike McCarthy's first year and the failure of Mike Nolan at a historic level, they allowed the most points in franchise history that year too. And then they made a change, but they hired a guy who had been a coordinator before in Dan Quinn.
Right.
And they drafted Micah Parsons, who had an enormous impact right away on the defense. Is that going to happen with Caleb Downs and Christian Parker, who's never done this before? I don't know. But I would think that they're not going to, continue to be a bad defensive team to the extent that they've been. I mean, they've given up the most points in the league over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And they have a 4th defensive coordinator in 4 years. Pretty hard to put together the pieces when the system's constantly changing. But I mean, Christian Parker, what he does best. Schottenheimer said, "Hey, this guy's a superstar when it comes to coaching the secondary," and that's where Jerry has said that the biggest issue was on defense last year. Of course, he's not going to say we were missing a pass rusher,
right?
But
that I traded away.
That I traded away a week before the season started, when everybody on the staff thought they were going to build everything around this guy.
Hold on now, Ed. I knew we were getting Quinnen Williams.
Which, that's a great segue, though, because Quinnen's got a lot of rep around the league. He's been named, I think, the best defensive lineman in the NFL recently, and a PFF or something like that put that
Interior
out.
defensive lineman.
Sure.
Yeah.
But having that as the main central focus point of that defensive line, how much does that help everyone else around him?
It should help. And I mean, some people would argue that in trading Odigizua, they traded the wrong defensive tackle, and keeping Kenny Clark. But he's a veteran player, so you got 2 established guys inside who they have emphasized pushing, the pocket at the quarterback. That's what a quarterback likes. And Dak, when I asked him about it last year, he agreed that that's what affects the quarterback the most. That being said, the people who get paid in this league are the Myles Garretts who come around the corner.
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of Aaron Donalds, although there might be another one pretty soon.
I was going to say, he did practice recently, I thought.
But, I think that those are the issues that are going to determine the outcome of how well this defense plays in year 1 under Christian Parker. I mean, you got to like what you're hearing,
right?
But at some point you got to see it. And I just don't think you're going to see it until at least 3-4 games into the season.
I think their blueprint might be the Chiefs of a few years ago, where they didn't have a dominant edge rusher, but they had Chris Jones at the peak of his powers.
Although he can kick out. And
he can.
They
moved him all across and shooting every gap.
And Steve Spagnuolo, is one of the most accomplished defensive coordinators in football, and he was putting the pieces together.
But in terms of not having a strictly an edge guy, I mean, Chris Jones was multiple, but in terms of getting that interior rush, that's what he did for so many teams. Aaron Donald, they won a Super Bowl, and that was exactly it.
Yeah.
Sure, they had some edge help on that Rams team, but not as much. So there is a way to reach a Super Bowl by getting that interior rush, as long as it is truly elite and there's supplemental, players on the back end, safety and middle linebackers, being 2 key roles. Overshown, to me, might be the biggest X factor for this defense, more than Quinnen, more than all these other guys, because when Overshown is healthy, he brought an element of speed and instinct that we just didn't see at all really last year from a defense that sorely needed it in that part of the field.
But you're also relying on a guy who's never shown
surgeries,
he can be reliable. He hasn't finished any of the 3 seasons healthy that he's played, and he's missed an enormous number of games. He was at times before all of this a really great playmaker with unique speed, unique hitting ability. I mean, I asked Will McClay about him, and he says, well, the thing about him is, like, most guys kind of slow up as they're ready to make a tackle, and he doesn't. Like, he just accelerates into the opponent that he's about to bring down. So, yeah, he's a huge piece to this. I think Barham could be an interesting guy.
Yeah, they've been talking to Barham a lot.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me about he and Downs, as far as being ready to play right away, they both finished their college careers playing for NFL defensive coordinators. You know, Barham played at Michigan for Wink Martindale, and Caleb Downs played for Matt Patricia. So they're used to handling a lot of volume. They're used to, being involved in high-stakes games with great talent on the other side of the ball, and they're used to handling a lot of responsibility and technology and terminology and whatever else. So I think that could make for an easier transition for those two players.
Do you think that Caleb Downs is going to be able to live up to all of his first-round pick hype?
It didn't seem like there was anybody who really had many questions about him. And if you look at, the way Christian Parker, like Vic Fangio, builds his defense, that's the key player in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, he's the slot corner. Yep. He's playing safety. I thought it was interesting that after the Cowboys picked him, Nick Saban said he wouldn't play him at slot corner. I'd play him at free safety and let him make 1,000 plays, Thinks that's the best way for him to.
Like a Jesse Bates type.
Yeah. But obviously they had a very specific identity and role for him in this defense, and the defense they probably thought wouldn't work to the extent they expect it does without his presence.
Is it surprising, though, because we saw Bland play slot for a long time and succeed in that role? I thought that might be a natural transition.
And then he tackles pretty well for a corner.
He does.
I thought it was interesting that.
Or were they worried about, like, the injury concerns coming off of.
With Bland?
Yeah.
I think with Bland, the injuries are a question mark, and his ability to kind of cover deep. Like, he gets beat deep down the sideline when he gets beat. He's great at undercutting routes.
But those are a lot of
more
drags and slants, right?
Right, and you get those more inside than you do with the outside guys. But,
right.
I think it'll be interesting to see how Caleb Downs performs early on, and there are going to be a lot of expectations on him. He's going to have a lot of responsibility. And can he have the Micah Parsons type effect as a rookie?
I know that corner and edge rusher, jump out, at least in my eyes, as needs and holes from last year, but there were no linebackers. They had no linebackers. And I know Demo was hurt.
They traded for two, and they still had none.
Well, and remember,
if you're trading for a Bengals linebacker, you're going to have a bad time.
Right. Who was
What about
on the
Kenneth
practice squad at
Murray?
the time.
And then he promptly retired.
Yeah, exactly.